For centuries, the tarot cards have tumbled through history, a tantalizing blend of mystery and beauty. Packed with potent images and ancient symbols, these cards have predicted the rise and fall of kings and empires. Linked to the most ancient mystical systems, the tarot cards' origins are as mysterious as the source of their powers. How can a pack of cards probe the past and unlock the secrets of the future? And how do tarot readers use the extraordinary images on the cards to unravel our deepest, darkest concerns?
Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
and The Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, maybe a bit irrational Seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into the controversial topics that some may call New Age, or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And hopefully look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
and the seekers.
This episode we're talking about tarot or tarot. It seems like the pronunciation is up for debate.
I'd go with tarot. So tarot is traditionally a divinatory tool, but it can also be used for gaining self-knowledge. You deal some cards onto the table and interpret them to uncover things about yourself or whoever you're reading for.
So today we're going to be very brave and try and give each other a reading live on air, and then chat about what tarot is and if or how it works. So what, coming to this for the first time, or maybe not for the first time, what's your feelings as a seeker about tarot?
Yeah, so my experience with it isn't very long. I think it was towards the end of 2017, a friend, and this is at a similar time that I was getting into another divinatory tool, astrology, right? And she kind of presented me with her own tarot deck, which was like a non-traditional one. It was pretty cool looking. I hadn't seen anything like that. And she did a 12 card spread for me. So pulled
Intense.
12 cards. You're right. That was an interesting lunch. And kind of gave me a reading, one card per month for the next year. And I actually annoyingly can't find the original cards that I pulled or anything like that. But so I can't verify how accurate that was. But it was definitely just very entertaining. I felt quite enthusiastic for my year ahead. 2018 was not so great, so I don't think that it could have been that accurate in the end. But it did pique my curiosity quite enough. And I ended up in the following year making my own deck. So just buying a blank set of tarot cards from Amazon, drawing on them and fell tipping them basically. So pretty DIY. And I still didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about the history of tarot or anything, but I did learn. I took a Udemy course.
Oh my God, you're like, I don't really know anything about tarot, but I had this amazing reading. I've made my own deck and I've done an online course on it. Just that.
Just, I'm sure everyone does that when they learn about tarot. But yeah, since then, I hadn't been using it that much. But then maybe like this year, so 2020, I've been pulling a card a day. And, at first I was kind of asking the deck or whatever, Mr. Tarot in the sky, quite specific questions like, tell me how to solve this problem. And didn't get like really great answers. Often, and we'll talk maybe about this later, but often they would feel quite like something was making fun of me. But now more recently, the only kind of question I really ask the deck or the oracle is tell me something about my day ahead. Like, what do I need to know? What do I need to learn? Something really general like that. So yeah, it's become a regular part of my morning routine now.
Nice.
How about yourself? What's your experience with tarot?
Yeah, I used to read tarot. Back in the day, I used to actually be quite into it. I wasn't into the traditional tarot though. I'm sure we'll talk about the different types of tarot decks there are. But my particular favourite one was, and this is going to sound really lame, but if you Google Brian Froud, you'll see it's not quite as lame as it sounds. It was a fairy oracle deck. So all the cards are fairies, but when I say fairies, I mean like, the fae, like, so they're like creepy sometimes and they're sexy sometimes and they're weird. Brian Froud did all the art for Labyrinth, the movie, and Dark Crystal. So that kind of aesthetic, I was really into it, and I used to obsessively draw in that style and copy his illustrations and try and it's one of my first sort of big artistic projects. So the idea was in a tarot deck, as we'll speak about, each card has like a meaning, and these are the same, but they're just different to the original deck. So you have like a card that is the mother, and it's like a half frog, half woman creature sitting on a toadstool, just cool stuff like that. And I thought I was getting messages from outside myself. I don't know exactly where I thought they were coming from, but I definitely didn't think of it as like a intuitive tool, which is more what I'm inclined to think now, obviously, as a skeptic. I think in retrospect, especially when I was reading for other people, I was basically hot reading my friends, like the stuff about your friends and stuff you want to say to your friends.
And what's
but
hot
you
reading?
Don't have the opportunity. Oh, hot reading is, so there's this thing called cold reading, which we talked about a lot in our mediumship episode, and I'll probably talk about in the course of this episode too. But this is when you make guesses about someone based on little things like, what they're wearing, their age. You can make all sorts of guesses about where they might be in their life that sound very, very insightful, when in fact they're just well-informed guesses. Hot reading is when you have other information. So if we went to a psychic together, as we often do, and I said I think she was hot reading that woman, what I would mean is she's probably popped over to Facebook and had a look at that woman's profile before she got in. And psychics are known to do this. Often you're registered to go to an event through Facebook, so they can literally look and see who's going to be in the audience. So yeah, cold reading is guessing with no information. Hot reading is when you've got information. And in my case, I was obviously getting information from my friendship with the person, so I knew them quite well. So it's quite easy to make guesses about what their life was like that sound insightful, because I generally have a little bit of insight into my friend's life. We all do, right? Yeah, what we used to do and what we're going to do today is, or what I used to do, especially when I was doing a little reading just for myself, is I take one card to represent the past, one card to represent the present, and one card to represent the future. And I sort of lay them out and have a think about them. So that's the model we're going for. And I guess I'm going to be the first victim.
You certainly are. So you've picked. Do you want to tell us what cards you're picking?
Yeah, the first card that I picked, and I'm picking from my own deck, which I bought for this episode a little while ago, and they're really beautiful. They're called the Tarot Del Fuego by Riccardo Calvolo, as the illustrator. Unfortunately, I kind of, although they are really beautiful, I wish I had the Rider-Waite deck, because they just came with a little book of interpretations, and the interpretations refer to the Rider-Waite deck. It's like a standard. So
right. I didn't know this myself. I think this is an interesting side point, because when I was drawing my deck, similarly, I didn't know about the Rider-Waite tradition, and I was basing mine on just like a fancy, snazzy looking app. Mm. And then you kind of get far away, because that Rider-Waite deck, I must say, is like really, really packed with symbolism.
Yeah, and it's always referred to in the interpretations. It's like, you can see the woman is looking up to the sky, which represents this. I'm like, well, the woman's not looking up into the sky in my picture.
Completely. At one point, though, I remember saying to you, but I really wish I had the Rider-Waite. This is like a long time ago, and just listeners, we should explain that. We recorded this episode like a year ago.
Yeah.
The recording was so bad. We were in Amsterdam, so that was like another reason why it might have been not so good, let's just say. So we're recording it again, and it's going to be quite interesting to see how differently we see this now. But I remember one thing that I said to you was, I wish I had the Rider-Waite deck, and you were like, those illustrations are horrid.
I've completely come around. I don't remember saying that at all. I've come right around to now thinking I wish I had the Rider-Waite deck. But I do. I mean, if you're not learning, if you already know tarot, or if you just want something that's really beautiful, I would recommend Tarot Del Fuego. It's amazing. I'll tell you about the Lovers card. It's got so there's a theme with this guy's art style, which is that everyone has multiple eyes. So in this case, we've got a woman. She's got 2 heads, 8 eyes, 2 arms. One of her heads has got red hair and one has got brown hair. And the brunette is holding a glass of red wine and the redhead is holding a glass of white wine. As a man sort of looking at them, and he's got like face paint on and I think a tattoo on his neck. I'm not sure what it is. And there's like all fire inside him. And he's like looking at this 2-headed woman. And there's all little hearts and stars all around them. And it's really brightly coloured and very pretty. And we'll put pictures up on Instagram because I'm sure I'm not doing it justice. That is my card for the past, the Lovers. What do you make of it?
Very nice. So this, to me, would suggest that you have, in the past, been quite successful in relationships.
Booyah!
And you might have found or believed to have found your soulmate.
Aww.
And it is interesting that one of the characters in the card in your deck has red hair.
Yeah.
And and that's me. I was going to say, and that could be indicative of your relationship with your husband, who is a ginger.
Yeah, good point.
Quite an obvious point there, and that is an example of hot reading somebody. And yeah, this is a relationship that goes way beyond just like surface level sexual energy. Like this stuff goes into something that is very spiritual and almost tantric. So while these lovers can refer to a romantic tie, it can also refer to friendships and other close relationships. But yeah, I really think that this speaks to a real positive past and maybe current relationship.
Definitely current.
Yeah.
Well, you can be more right.
Right.
And now
Right,
I'm blushing.
Oh,
Should I move on to my present card?
please do.
Which doesn't look so promising. It's called the Hanged Man. It has a number on it. Oh, the other one had a number as well, but they're Roman numerals, so I can't read them because I'm an idiot. This one is X11, so that would be 11?
12.
12.
It's like the easiest thing to
Well,
learn.
I knew the X was 10, and then I forgot to count the 2
1
numbers
plus 1.
afterwards. So it's card number 12, the Hangman. It's got a picture of a man hanging from one ankle. He looks like his legs are covered in scales, which is kind of cool, and he's on fire. He's got 4 eyes on his chest and a nose also on his chest. His shirt's ripped open and a mustache, but you can't actually see his head, which is where the eyes would normally be located, because it's covered in a brown bag with a rope around the neck. And there's 2 little mountains at the bottom of the card, and they've both got eyes on them too. Yeah, and it's oh, there's a bat, there's everything. There's a lot of stuff going on here. There's birds with 2 heads, only 2 eyes, 1 on each head, but maybe they have another eye on the other side. The total eyes on this card are 1, 2, 10 eyes on one card. So
Very
I don't know
nice.
if that's actually a record for this deck because it is eye heavy. Maybe it's
Wow.
eye for insight or something. Like maybe there's a hidden message in there.
Yeah, 3rd eye, inner eye, 10th eye, whatever. Yeah, so the Hangman is a card that represents taking time to pause, surrender, let go, and gain new perspectives. So this could be an indication that right now you're being asked to put things on hold. Let's say that you want to move forward with something, but you're currently locked in your house in quarantine. And just, for example. And this is a kind of time to reflect on how you were doing things in the past and maybe needing to do things differently. It's that saying, what got you here won't get you there. So it's a time to release some of those old mental models, behavioural patterns, things that no longer serve you. And, to do that, obviously we need to take some time to pause and let our inner guidance system speak to us. So the important thing is, even if you feel like frustrated, like you really want to like hit the gas right now, you really want to not be too tempted. As I know you're an Aries sun, you kind of want to just like push forward, just bringing in some astrology here. So it's a really good time to just, take a chill pill and do some of that inner work and dance around a maypole.
Well, that was an appropriate card to pull at this time. Is that the reason he's hanging? It's like suspension. It's like
that's a good analogy.
Because in the Rider-Waite deck, it's
analogy.
the same thing. This isn't just the crazy cards that I have. It's the guy hanging from one foot upside down. That's a very classic image. In the Rider-Waite, he only has 2 eyes. But apart from that.
Yeah, and it is worth thinking about the Rider-Waite deck. The cards are in order for a reason. Like that Major Arcana, the cards like 0 through 20 or whatever it is, which those 2 cards that we've just looked at are both from the Major Arcana, and they kind of tell the story of like the hero's journey in a way. So I can't remember what comes before and after the Hangman, but this would be like the point in the story when maybe the hero, I'm guessing, like goes into the cave, does some reflection,
comes out
Yoda,
stronger,
and so on.
Yeah, that is a good point. So we haven't actually introduced like what the Major Arcana is. It's a collection of like almost like face cards, I guess, and they all have the names like the Lovers or like the Hangman. I think there's 22 of them, but I don't know.
Yeah, and just to clarify, there are also face cards for every deck. Oh, yeah. So there's a bit more to that, but like yeah, these are the fun ones. The Major Arcana are like the significant ones. The Minor Arcana are minor. But yeah, maybe we'll get more into that.
Oh, well, I've got something from the Minor Arcana for my last, although it is a face card. Yes. It's the Queen of Cups, and she has 3 eyes that I can see, but I can only see her in profile, so I'm assuming she has 6. She's wearing a crown. There's all flowers all around her. She has a big pregnant belly. She has a tattoo of an eye on her hand, which is covering her breasts because she's nude. And she has in her pregnant belly a cup, I guess, or a chalice with an eye on it, and it's full of soil, and in the soil is growing a little cute little plant, and it's very pink compared to the other 2. It's like almost all look at that very pink card.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, it's beautiful. They're all beautiful.
So let me tell you about your future.
Please do.
The Queen of Cups says that you are developing your intuition. And I think that hand on the heart with the eye on it speaks to, this isn't a head-based knowledge, it's a heart-based knowledge. But in order to kind of step into that, you kind of need to pay attention, I think, to the Hanged Man, that moment of pause. And ultimately what this is leading towards is you're developing your ability to really be able to read other people and really get a sense of how to communicate effectively, and to show empathy and all the things that we've been talking about on the show recently. But yeah, and basically just helping other people. It might be, Rebecca, that you become a healer.
Whoa.
I had to throw that in there as the
so I don't have to worry about the pregnant appearance of this woman.
No, you're pregnant with intuition and insight.
Excellent, thank God for that. She's not pregnant in the Rider-Waite deck. I got some comfort from checking that out. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, in summary, lead with your head, not your heart. Be open to receiving these intuitive messages, and feel the feels.
Oh, that's great advice. Thank you.
You're welcome, and also become a healer.
Consider becoming a healer. Okay, shall we do you? No, you've embarrassed me enough.
Please.
Okay, so what did you draw for your first card?
So my first card, hang on.
Just shuffle your deck.
Yeah. So my first card was the Fool. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. So the Fool in my deck is a jolly looking man. He is juggling 7 juggling balls. There's a lot of red and green and yellow because those are the felt tips that I had at hand. And yeah, he's kind of got crossed legs, like he's trying to hold in a pea. So tell me, what does the Fool mean?
Well, first, I think you're really underselling your cards. They are really beautiful, and it surprised me when you first showed them to me. Dead casual, just like, oh, this is my deck. And I looked at them and was like, these are homemade.
Thank you. It was fun, but I will say that the designs themselves are very much based on a really cool app called Labyrinthos. So that, I think, part of it is because I know that I've stolen the designs to an extent.
Well,
Not
it's
totally
very
original.
beautifully executed anyway. So the Fool is, he's an interesting card because depending on who you talk to, he is either the first card in the major arcana or he's card 0, so he's outside the numbering system. And I think that's actually super relevant to the whole of your reading, but I'll come back around to that. So he's not necessarily part of the story, he's the space before the story, which makes sense because he's in your past. In the earliest decks that were made, the tarot decks, he was represented as a vagabond or like a wandering holy man, which could not be more appropriate for someone who's just spent a year wandering around the globe.
Definitely relate to that.
And that sense of he's out there seeking, but there is no object for his seeking yet. He's seeking, but what is he seeking for? He doesn't know. He's surrounded by possibilities, and those balls that are thrown up in the air, they're like the possibilities. In the Rider-Waite deck, he is walking right to left, just about to unknowingly step off the edge of a cliff, which I think relates to your balls in the air thing, because it's like the juggler with the balls in the air, and he doesn't know whether he's going to be able to catch them or not. Yeah. And the man just about to step off the cliff. It's like the moment before something happens. It's all about uncertainty and possibility and sort of maybe learning to be graceful or having to be graceful when you're at the whim of fate, when you don't have control. So basically, this card describes an exciting but disorienting time, which is exactly what you've just gone through with all your travels. It also refers to a sort of like, almost like a intoxication, like things coming over you and just feeling so intense and having these really intense emotions, but not really having like any, again, it's that thing of like seeking but not having object you're seeking, having these emotions but not being able to like weave them into the context of your life. It's just stuff's happening and it feels very intense and crazy, but you haven't quite like put it all together and made sense of it yet. In your deck, he looks like, I mean, he's juggling. He's got the I don't know what that kind of hat is called, with the jester's hat with the bells on it. So he kind of looks like a joker, which obviously makes me think of the trickster, that archetype of the trickster, which is often associated with the Fool card. The thing about the trickster is he breaks rules. He's always up to crazy things. Like, actually, this relates to your experience with the Hare Krishnas. Because Krishna, when he's young, is a bit of a trickster character.
Oh, totally.
So no wonder he was walking beside you whilst you were travelling. So yeah, he unsettles definitions and challenges assumptions. Like, he's always like just making you see things through a slightly different lens and forcing you to see things through a different lens when you don't necessarily want to. But he can also trick himself, so he can get himself into lots of trouble because he's constantly shifting and never really focused on one thing. The thing is, if you're constantly in flux, and this is obvious when you're physically moving, but even ideologically constantly in flux, or like with your friendships or your relationships or anything, it's really hard to build on a foundation that's always moving around. Definitely. So you end up in this kind of formless, chaotic state. That is the undifferentiated chaos, relating back to our chaos magic chat in the previous episode, which you emerge out of. And you emerge into the present, and what card did you pull for the present?
I did. I just want to say how great that was. Oh my god, I'm like, Rebecca, be my tarot reader. So I picked the Emperor, which is number 4 in the Major Arcana, and he's kind of sat down, he's like squatting in my deck, holding like one of those orb things with a cross on the top, which makes me think of like a priesty thing. And he's also holding a, what would you call one of those sticks?
A scepter?
A scepter, that is it. And there's I remember choosing purple because it's like a royal colour to me.
I thought of that when I saw it too. So and I thought how appropriate, because you've got either side of him, you've got these 2 big purple curtains that have been pulled apart. So it's like he's coming onto the stage, he's coming out of the chaos onto the stage. And who is it? It's the Emperor. In the squatting position, which sounds a bit undignified, but if you think about how much hard work that must be on his thighs, this is a powerful card. This is a powerful character.
I have got great thighs.
So yeah, stepping out the chaos to make your mark on the world. This is what the Emperor is about. In the Rider-Waite deck, he sits on the throne of Mars, which is obviously our patron planet as Aries people. As I'm sure you know. And Mars's whole thing is action, energy, and desire. That's the sort of symbols represented like ideas represented with that symbol. So I think, because of this thing with him being sitting on the throne of Mars and you being an Aries, it is clear to me, so clear to me now, that he represents your relationship with yourself. I don't think this is like the Emperor is like your dad or some man in your life. I think this is you in conversation and in relationship with yourself.
I do see myself as an emperor.
There you go. But I'm a bit concerned about this card because I feel like it's just, okay, it's too quick. Like going from the Fool to the Emperor seems a bit nuts. Like you're racing through the major arcana, like,
Right.
and you haven't stopped. You haven't had that whatever it was that my card was.
The intuition one.
Yeah. So it feels like if you go, you need something else in between, but maybe I'll come back around to that. And the other thing that I worry about with the Emperor is he is so strict. Like he gets up early, he works too hard, he doesn't take breaks.
Such a bit.
So this is advice I've been giving Kat for weeks and weeks because she never takes breaks. But it's true. Well, it's not true. But you know, the Emperor card could be seen to represent this. He's very strict. And if this card is about your relationship with yourself, I would suggest that perhaps you're being too strict with yourself. And that kind of enforcing those very strict rules is not actually a very practical way to get shit done, because sooner or later you just break.
And then the empire comes crashing down.
Well, yeah. And what did you draw for your next card?
Oh, this is so sad and so funny. So I got the 5 of Cups, guys, and this is a picture of a crying lady who, funnily enough, has ginger hair.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 5 cups. 2 are standing up and 3 are falling over, and that's important.
Yes. The other thing I noticed, comparing your card from your deck to the Rider-Waite deck, is in the Rider-Waite, she is looking, so we see her in profile, looking from the right to the left, which is, whereas in your deck, she's looking from left to right. So you see the right-hand side of her face in your deck and the left-hand side of her face in the Rider-Waite. Visually, I think this is, I don't know where I picked this up, but it's like a common thing that people say about film and visual arts. People moving from left to right in our culture, in basically countries and languages where we write right to left instead of left to right, that represents positive forward progress movement, whereas the other way around is negative. So in your deck, this card is more positive than it is in the Rider-Waite.
That's such a good interpretation.
Which maybe makes me think that this is something that, I mean, it's obviously sad, but it is kind of like a progress, like you have to get through this and you have to learn from it. I think, so yeah, maybe it's not such a bad card after all, and maybe it is what's necessary to get you out of that Emperor stage, out of that really fixed, I'm going to get this done. You need to, what's she mourning for? Is she mourning for the thing that the Emperor was trying to bully her into doing? And now she's like, I just can't do it. I can't do everything. I'm not fucking Superwoman. I need to let go of that idea of myself as being all powerful and actually figure out what I really need and really want. I think that whole, she's mourning the death of that capital S self that the Emperor was trying to create, but that was a fiction. So there's it's good that she's mourning, it's good that she's got over it, and she's mourning missed opportunities and a narrowing of possibilities, which is what happens naturally as we get older. But again, this is something that happens naturally as we get older. This is you can't be a ballerina now, I'm sorry to say. That time is over.
What about a Coca-Cola van driver?
That's a possibility.
That's a possibility. Can't drive, but yeah.
Basically, it's a cups card. Cups are related to water because that's what they contain. The 5 of Cups, the woman, the redhead, the crying redhead, is fluid, like the liquid in the cups. Trying to be solid was never going to work. You don't you have to channel your talents. Don't grab them and bully them into shape.
Right.
And I think once you've gone through that mourning stage, which you will go through because you're moving left to right, you can start creating from a position of real self-knowledge. And this is what I think is really interesting about these cards that you've picked, because the Fool is the card outside time. And we talked about this as being past, present, future, but I don't think this is, in your case, I don't think it is past, present, future. I think it's a cycle. It's not just a cycle you get into, it's a cycle everyone gets into. You're in the chaos, you don't know what's going on, then you fixate on something and try and make it happen by applying all these strict rules,
it's like
and then
order.
It doesn't work out.
Yeah, like lots of chaos, then you enforce all the order onto it as much as possible.
Yes, exactly, which is why I think you're missing the Magician card. If you could just slide in the Magician card after your fall, after the chaos, after the exploration and the crazy fun times, and, stressful but intense times of that moment, the Magician fall is all about setting like goals that align with what the Thelemites would call your true will.
Right.
So the Magician is about realizing what you want, why you want it, and then making a commitment to yourself to do it, and to do it in a way that can actually work for you. Because the thing is, like, if, for example, you decided you want to get into jiu-jitsu,
I do.
and there you go, me too. That's why it came to my mind. So, and you started going to a couple of classes, you might think, oh, this is actually really hard, and my body's achy, I'm not going to bother going anymore. That's one possibility. Or you might stick it out through that, but then just, lose the motivation and just like I don't even know why I'm bothering. Sort of like, I put in this time, I don't know why I'm bothering. Those are like the two ways that you would drop out. One of them is because you didn't really understand what jiu-jitsu was when you made the commitment to do it. The other one is because you didn't know why you were doing it. Because the why is what gives you the motivation. What was like some philosopher guy, old guy in a toga probably, always says if you know a why, you can stand any how.
I'm pretty sure it was Viktor Frankl from the
It could well be.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he wore some togas. Yeah. But yeah, so that's what the Magician card's about. It's about knowing what the thing is that you're trying to do and why you're doing it, because those things will give you the motivation to actually make it happen. And then once it happens, it will become like a part of your narrative, a part of your story, instead of just this thing you did and you're not even sure why you did it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think you know that you have the discipline and power of the Emperor, and you know that you have all the possibilities of the Fool. All you have to do is unite them with the Magician card, with that really like sensible, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to bully myself into it. I'm going to do it because I really want to do it, and I don't just want to do it in like a, oh, it might be fun sort of way, but I know exactly why I'm doing it and how it will fit into my life and how it will enrich me as a person. Then you'll have that staying power to make things happen. You'll never end up at that 5 of Cups card or crying again. Or you probably will, because we all do, but less likely.
Yeah, I'm almost like, I wonder if it's the 5 of Cups that leads me to the Magician in that way. So I can kind of, I don't know, that is really interesting, that just this cycle idea. And it's like,
I just see it because it's so common, like it's so common in everyone, definitely in me, in this thing of like, everything's all over the place. Then I impose order. And because, I mean, we're similar in that we have those kind of intense personalities where we don't just mess around with stuff. We get seriously into it. And then for some reason, it just like, the passion wanes, or it gets too hard, or like there's some excuse to give up, and you take it because you don't really know why you're doing it.
Right, and the cups fall over, and then there's like a mourning process.
Yes, and this is the thing, the 5 of Cups, right? 3 cups fallen down. Yeah. Oh no, that's so sad. There's 2 cups still upright.
Exactly, and it's so much more manageable to be handling 2 things, not 5 things.
That's very true, yeah.
And the Magician would be able to tell me what those like 2 things are.
What they should be, yeah. So that's your homework for this reading. Go away and meditate on the Magician and think about making goals that will be stick-toable and fulfilling. I mean, maybe that's everyone's homework, actually.
Good God, I think that was really, really good. I would pay, money for a reading from Rebecca in the future.
Well, maybe we should set it up with Patreon so that if people donate over a certain number of monies, that they can get a reading from one of us. Maybe an astrology reading from you. That would be more expensive because you're actually a pro. But yeah,
could do a basic one though. Yeah, actually that sounds good. If you guys who are listening would like that, let us know at hello@seekerandtheskeptic.com.
And we'll be back with you after a short break to chat about the research we've done into the history of tarot and make sense of all this madness.
This show has already taken us to some strange places, literally and metaphysically.
and we love making it for you.
If you enjoy listening and have $1 a month to spare, we'd appreciate your support on Patreon.
Patreon is a platform for supporting content creators like us.
If you pledge $1 a month, we'll spend it on boring things like hosting fees and audio equipment.
And fun things like psychic readings, crystal healing, ayahuasca retreats.
Yeah, we'll spend it on drugs.
There are lots of adventures we'd like to go on, so if you want us to go hunting for the Loch Ness Monster, visit a haunted castle or Area 51, you're going to have to chip in.
We think having conversations about this stuff, paranormal, spiritual, weird stuff, is really important, especially between people who don't agree. Having these experiences is fun, doing the research is interesting, but the most important thing is the conversations.
We hope listening to our podcast will inspire you to start talking to people you would normally dismiss as grumpy old skeptics.
Or flaky woo-woo seekers.
If you think these sorts of conversations are important too, you can support us on Patreon. And as a supporter, for as little as $1, you'll be able to vote on upcoming show ideas.
And if there's something you're desperate for us to look into, whether it's acupuncture or vampires, Patreon supporters' requests will always go to the top of our consideration list.
Find out more at patreon.com/seekerskeptic. And that's Patreon spelt Patreon. So now we're going to talk a bit about, the history of tarot, a little bit of the research that we've done. And Rebecca, I just want to know, what have you skeptics got against the tarot then? Huh?
Oh my god, yeah. I think it's interesting actually, because I think a lot of what skeptics have against tarot is a misapprehension of what people are doing with it now, because I think traditionally the tarot was thought to be an actual oracle that told the future, whereas just from reading around the internet it seems more like people are doing more like what we just did. The sort of reading we did is quite typical, and that's just sort of friends talking to each other about their lives and about their advice and using their intuition to give advice. So I think what skeptics generally have against it is the idea that it can predict the future, because skeptics kind of not convinced by that. But I looked around to figure out where these cards came from, so maybe that'll give us some clues as to why skeptics are so damn skeptical about them. And I tracked them back to, this makes me sound so much more intrepid than I am, I tracked them back to the 15th century.
Dug through the archives of the British Library.
Yes, the dusty, dusty archives. So there was a deck of cards used to play a game that was kind of like trumps. Sometimes it was called Tarot or Tarocco or Tarancini. It was played all over Europe, not in the UK, but everywhere else, basically, all in mainland Europe. We had a go of this. The first time we recorded our tarot show, we played this, and it's not a very good game, I would say.
Out of all card games, it's one of the worst. Give it a go though.
There's no skill to it. Yeah, if you look up, maybe I'll put it in show notes, or you can just Google rules to Tarancini. It's just I don't know. It's you just put down a card, and if it's better than the previous card, you win. If it's higher than the previous card, you win. There's no real skill to it.
No.
But card they start out simple. So that original 15th century deck had 4 suits, just like we see today, and the major arcana. So the suits are cups or chalices, just like my Queen of Cups, pentacles or coins, which is a less obvious connection, but they're round, and a pentacle is a round, a 5-pointed star in a circle, so it kind of makes sense. Swords, just swords, nothing else. And then the 4th one is wands, batons, or sticks, which kind of makes sense. So, sticky type things. And then we've got the major arcana, which is, I checked, 22 cards. And those are the ones that we were talking about before. You've got the Fool, you've got the Devil, Death, lots of scary ones, lots of nice ones. So generally it's thought that card games overall were invented in ancient China and then spread from there. But it's one of these things, it could have been invented in multiple places because it's kind of obvious thing to do. People like to gamble. As soon as you've got paper and the ability to print or draw on it, someone's going to come up with this idea. Yeah, so when this game was bouncing around, it wasn't used for divination or anything like that. It was just a game. But cartomancy, which is reading the future through cards, that's what the mancy bit means, the future, was a thing. So it was only a matter of time before someone was like, oh, we can do cartomancy with this deck of cards. But it took until 1750 for someone to actually write the meanings down for the cards and come up with a signed definition for each of them, which I think is really interesting because, I mean, when I was researching to give you your reading, because, I mean, I don't want to do too much behind the curtains, but we did, go away and research the cards. That wasn't all off the top of our heads. I kept on finding people referring back to the Rider-Waite definitions, and, like, they were super important, like, they were canon. But these were just assigned after the cards had already existed for a long time. So who knows what the original inventor was thinking, or inventors was thinking. Anyway, so 1750 in France, this anonymous manuscript pops up with all the meanings of the tarot cards. And in 1781, there was this guy, he was like one of those Renaissance men, but I don't know if it's Renaissance times. But anyway, he was like this pastor, scholar, Freemason, he did everything. He was just a cool cat. Antony Court de Giblin, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, he came up with the idea that the tarot was the Book of Thoth. And this was like a game changer because the Book of Thoth is serious, scary shit in mythology. It's kind of like, what's it called in Lovecraft?
The Necronomicon.
Yes, exactly. It's like this secret book that everyone's heard tell of, but no one's really sure whether it exists or anything. So he was like, I've got it. I know where these cards came from. They are the Book of Thoth. And everyone's like, oh, that sounds interesting. What do you mean? Anton Court de Giblin. And Anton Court de Giblin replied, well, the Book of Thoth, it was hidden at the bottom of the Nile, guarded by snakes. Because it was so dangerous, right? Because it contains all the... Thoth is like a god of knowledge and, things man isn't meant to know. So hide his book at the bottom of the Nile, guard it with snakes, everything will be fine. But a prince, an ancient Egyptian prince, stole the book. Because obviously humans just always want to know shit. So if there's some secret book, they're going to get down there, fight the snakes, steal the book. And as punishment, Thoth killed his wife and son, which obviously shook him up a little bit. He was distraught. He commits suicide, and Thoth, or whoever, entombs him with the book. Like, well, now you've learnt your lesson. You are going to be stuck with this book forever in, I don't know, in some kind of horrible, like, liminal space between worlds, as gods often do when they get enraged with people. So that's all squared away, and it seems like everything's going to be fine from then on. But rumours get around that the Book of Thoth is out there, and many years later, someone breaks into the prince's tomb to steal the book. Of course, his ghost is there, so he fights the ghost, and he wins. Which is surprising, because fighting a ghost is hard.
That does sound hard. The sword would go right through it.
Yeah, especially in the dark. Like, which I imagine the tomb is dark. I'm picturing Indiana Jones. So he fights a ghost, succeeds against the ghost, don't know where the ghost goes, that's not in the story. Gets the book, hooray, I've got the book, opens the book, starts reading it, and of course the book drives him mad. This vision of a seductress comes out of it, all sexy-like, and says, hey, I'm a sexy book lady from beyond. Why don't you kill your children? And he's like, okay, sexy book lady. And yeah, it just drives him crazy, tells him to do horrible things, fucks up his life. So after making many mistakes, thanks to the evil, mad-inducing book, he has to return it to the tomb. And the kind of lesson of this story is... it's the classic Lovecraftian message. Some things man wasn't meant to know. Leave it alone, people. But this guy, Anton Court de Giblin, said, that's not the end of the story. At some point later, someone else came along. I don't think he was ever specific about who it was, and got the Book of Thoth back out, and to kind of to strip it of its power a little bit or something. They pretended that it was just casual old playing cards, like no big deal, and it got back out into the world that way. So this makes what was a fun card game into suddenly a magnet for everyone who's into the esoteric, and everyone's Crowley, all these guys, everyone's suddenly really interested in these cards that have been completely innocuous before. And we're getting now into the time of the Enlightenment. And whilst all that's going on, you've got the Counter-Enlightenment, who basically a bunch of sort of proto-romantics who are science is destroying all the magic and mystery of life. Ugh. Let's bring back magic with esoteria and ancient secrets and occultism, and let's set up secret societies and wear robes and like put one foot in a bowl of water and the other one on the land and raise our hands to the sky and worship ancient gods. You know how they do.
Yes.
Yeah. And grinding up old bits of mummies for medicine, because they were super into Egypt stuff. So the linking the cards to ancient Egypt is really good, because this is a time where everyone in the occult world is just completely fascinated by this. Is before they've translated the Rosetta Stone. So it's like, it's just so mysterious.
Ancient Egypt was trending on Twitter, basically.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. On occult Twitter.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the ancient Egypt stuff is fascinating. And like, I really think, I mean, obviously it's amazing that we have the Rosetta Stone and we can read these ancient manuscripts and stuff now. But I feel like interest in ancient Egypt has just waned since we know what they were saying. Like, there was a time where anyone could just imagine these crazy stories based on the pictures and the statues and the bits and bobs we had. And now it's like we can actually know, and people are less interested.
Yeah, mystery is very mysterious.
Yeah.
That wasn't meant to be
so wise, so true.
Yeah.
And then it sort of just bubbled along in the sort of occult / esoteric community, and at some point it got picked up by fortune tellers, and they were like, well, obviously we're gonna have a go at this. And then, more interestingly, perhaps for the sort of way that they're used today, Jungian psychoanalysts got interested in it. And I think Jung actually talked about it. I've got a quote from him here. He said, and he's basically thinking of this as a way to explore our intuition and our relationship with ourselves. He says, we can predict the future when we know how the present moment evolved from the past. He called for an intuitive method that has the purpose of understanding the flow of life, possibly even predicting future events. At all events, lending itself to the reading of the conditions of the present moment. So he's talking about it in a very modern sense, in that you look at the cards and they give you insight into how you're feeling and what you think, and then that might give you some tips for the future, basically. He's not saying they can tell the future, or at least not in this 1933 lecture that I found.
Yeah, I mean, Jung's an interesting one because he was into a lot of esoteric stuff and just was quite... he kept a lot of stuff back because he didn't want to be thought of as the, wacky mystic, even though he was. But that.
So you think I'm reading like a sanitized, sciencey version?
Yeah,
That's
which he would have wanted. He would have wanted that. I don't know. I'm not in contact with the ghost of Jung
right now.
Right now.
So that's where we get to the situation we have today. We have there's this Aeon article I read about Aeon article.
I would say Aeon, but
yeah,
up to you.
It starts with an A. I'll put a link in the show notes. You can decide for yourself.
Aeon or Aeon?
They basically say there's a soft school and a hard school of tarot. The soft school is that you're tapping into unconscious wisdom. Not super comfortable with the word unconscious, but you get the gist. And the hard school is you're tapping into supernatural wisdom, which is like getting messages from the beyond.
So are you getting it from inside or outside?
Exactly.
Right.
And that kind of takes us to where we are with modern tarot and what people are up to now, which I think is what you've been wandering around in the tumblers of modern tarot readers.
Yeah, and I think the way I kind of started was just finding out just how popular it was, because I guess the reason why we decided to do it was because it felt timely.
Yeah, for sure. And that was a year ago when we first decided to do the episode, and it was big then. It's only got bigger since then. Completely,
and it feels to me now like you can come across people who aren't into a lot of other occult stuff. They aren't into a lot of other divination tools, and are probably more on the camp of it comes from within. And there will be people who will just say, like myself, oh, I just pick a card a day, and that helps me kind of, tune in with myself and what I'm really feeling, because we're so busy not doing the feeling stuff a lot of the time. So yeah, I can definitely see how mainstream I want to say that it is today, partly because of that perception of it from the type 1 perspective. I think if this was 100 years ago, it would have been a different story, perhaps.
Yeah, I feel even when I was a teenager, there was definitely, I remember my friend had a deck of tarot cards and being like, whoa, that's occult shit. Like thinking it was not casual, and it wasn't about psychology. It was something occult for sure.
It had kind of sparkly backgrounds and lots of purple, and you'd associate it with Mystic Meg characters, perhaps.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, I think at the moment there are like well over 500 apps on the Apple App Store alone.
Wow.
And there have been these massive spikes. So like in 2018, there was a tarot deck called the Mother Peace Tarot, and that was created in the 1970s. So probably a time when, again, it was seeing maybe a resurgence because of the hippies. And they saw a 268% increase in sales in 2018.
Wow.
So there clearly has been like actually a very recent spike. And I've been pontificating about why. One reason being the people who are getting into it are probably of the millennial generation, let's say, and I guess I can say we as a millennial, are generally pretty much the least secular generation. Is that right? Least religious.
Yeah, least religious. Most secular.
Most secular a generation. Since what, 2,000 years? Like,
yeah.
It's probably at an all-time low, and we're finding meaning in other places that maybe don't feel as dogmatic, perhaps. Then there's this idea, and obviously we've got a lot of these are uncertain times. They're all uncertain times, but we need something, and this just seems to be one of those routes. And I think part of this is as well is the internet, the fact that we have so many routes. It's not just like, after the war, that would have been or during the war, the Second World War, that would have been an uncertain time, but they didn't have access to Twitter and Reddit and everything and Instagram. Whereas now we can actually just get into stuff, like so much stuff. For example, you can learn tarot very easily, even for free, on YouTube. There's a YouTube video called Learn the 78 Tarot Cards in 2 Hours, and that's been viewed.
I watched that. Well, I watched the first half.
And that's been viewed nearly like 1 million times. So we've always had like books, but to have access to teachings like this is pretty cool, and no wonder we're all getting into more weird things.
Just generally, all this stuff that we talk about on the show, I was into this stuff as a teenager, and if I wanted to find out about spontaneous human combustion or something, we haven't actually done an episode on that. Maybe not as but I would have to go to my local library, and there'd be like one book, and there'll be one chapter in the book that was relevant to it, and that would be it. But now I can, because you've seen me do it, I can spend weeks just going into rabbit holes, reading about any topic and getting really detailed and often massively conflicting and wrong information. But there's just so much more access to information. It's insane. And it must affect like every area, not just, the sort of things we talk about.
Yeah. We've discussed it on the show before, like just certain things that have had an upsurge in recent years, like astrology, like magic. And I also have this like last theory about how design might have a role to play, because again, like a lot of these esoteric arts, they're really like it's so visual, and I think now that design has kind of been democratized since like the advent of PC and Mac software, which continues to improve, prices generally come down, so being able to do high quality print design is pretty, like, it's super accessible now, especially to younger generations. So we're able in that way to kind of like update the look of these things. At the same time, still obviously making a lot out of the original designs. Like, most tarot people are like, you find out pretty quickly that you have to look at Rider-Waite deck to learn something about the tarot. It's not just, let me just look at the prettiest tarot deck, or it wasn't your case until and my case as well, until you kind of discover that there is something old to this. But it's gone.
No, I think the other thing I noticed when I was looking into this is there's lots of people offering to print your own tarot cards. That seems to be a big thing. So there are so many different types of decks available, like literally anything that you're interested in. If you're interested in tattoos, there'll be the Tarot of Tattoos. If you're interested in cats, there'll be the Tarot of Cats. There's literally something for everyone, and it feels a bit like it's just an overcrowded marketplace.
Well, yeah. I mean, like the Tarot of Tattooed Cats, I think, is a new one for us. But yeah, and to add to that, you've also got people doing like funding, like Kickstarter projects, which again, that wouldn't have been in existence 30 years ago. So it would have been really expensive to try and make your own tarot deck. Whereas now we can just be producing loads, and because there's something for everyone gets into tarot. Yeah. So I think that part has a big part to play. So yeah, not surprised that it is so popular.
No, I'm not surprised either. I mean, it is really good to have something outside yourself that you can refer to that gives you sort of like seeds of insight into your life, obviously. And they're beautiful and they're incredibly available. So it does make sense that they're back in. I think, as I said before, the reason why skeptics get so bristly whenever you mention tarot, and I feel like I almost should have said this earlier in the episode, because if there are any skeptics listening, they're like, is she even a skeptic? Why hasn't she brought up all these things? So it's time for me to bring up all these things.
Please do.
So basically, we talked before about cold reading and hot reading. If you're thinking of a traditional tarot reading where you go into some woman's tent, I'm just going to completely give you a very broad portrait of what might happen. So you've got the velvet curtains and everything. She's got like a round table. She's sitting behind there. She's got a high collar on. This is what people are imagining when they think they're going for a tarot reading. And she's got kind of spooky dark eye makeup, and the lights are low, and there's maybe some candles and some incense. And she will lean forward, take your hands, and proceed to gain your trust and complicity. That's step one in any good cold reading. So she'll say something like, the cards they speak to you through me. So you're going to have to help me make sense of all of this, because I am reading what the cards say, and I'm going to tell you, and if you just tell me if I'm right or wrong, and then we can get to the most accurate reading. This is obviously just a good way to make friends with someone, have a conversation with someone. You want them to trust you, you want them to be playing the same game you're playing, but it's also a good way to, if you want to give the impression that you have access to knowledge that is inaccessible to normal people, that's exactly what you need to do. You need to get your querent, which is what they call the customer. Querent meaning someone who brings a question. You need to get the customer on your side and playing the game. And the game is, we're going to talk about your future. Now you're going to have to give me a few signs, whether I'm getting it right or wrong. Then she'll proceed to obviously lay out the cards and refer to whatever knowledge she has of the cards, but probably a lot of what she's saying will be laced with these things, which I know I've talked about on the show before, so you might be bored of hearing it, but just in case someone hasn't heard this before, it'll be good old Barnum Statements. Mm-hmm. And they're statements that seem individualized, but they're general. So they're called Barnum Statements because there was this American showman called P.T. Barnum who used to say, we have something for everyone at his circus. And this is the kind of statements they are. So I'll just give you a few examples of what they might be. I sense that you're sometimes insecure, especially with people you don't know very well. It's a great Barnum statement because pretty much everyone can relate to it, but it feels individual, especially if some woman's making intense eye contact with you over a smoky table while she says it. Another one, which is really good, is, I should have thrown this in. I could have put it in on the 5 of Cups, because water. You had an accident when you were a child involving water.
I did.
There you go. A lot of people did. It's very, very common. I actually can't think of one myself, but I'm sure I would if I had a lovely lady staring at me with her intense eyes and the smell of incense. Another good one might be, you're having problems with a friend or relative. This card clearly shows. Who isn't? Come on. But that would give them the opportunity to open up and talk about that, which would make them think, wow, she's so insightful. She knew all about my trouble with my sister Catherine, when all she said was this bland statement that actually didn't relate to your sister Catherine at all. I'm giving a very kind of skeptical reading of this. Another way to look at this could be, what a delightful way to give someone an opportunity to talk about their troubles. But let's stick from the skeptical perspective for a moment. So another thing that they love to do is flatter you, because it's obvious everyone loves to be flattered, right? Classic piece of flattery you might get from a tarot reader. And I mean, again, I'm saying this, it might sound like I'm implying that they're doing this in like a scheming way, like they're deliberately trying to trick you. That's not necessarily true. They might be unaware that they are doing this. This is just a way that they have of communicating, which has worked so well for them so many times that they slip into it without even realizing that it's cold reading or realizing any of the techniques they're using. So a good piece of flattery, this is often referred to as fine flattery in the sort of, if you read the literature about cold reading, is to compliment someone on their open-mindedness. So it's a really good compliment, because someone coming to a tarot reader is probably open-minded. Even if they're not, everyone likes to be thought of as open-minded, so you could probably say it to anyone, but particularly people coming to a tarot reader. And it encourages belief. It's like, totally. Oh, you're so open-minded. You probably believe everything I say, don't you?
Yeah, and then they're going to do that to prove it. Like, yes, I want to be open-minded, so I'm going to prove that I am.
Oh, I wish I could remember. There's a word for it, a fancy word. A friend of mine used the other day, but I can't think what it is, where your expectations of the person affect the way you speak to them, which affects the way they are to you. And you can create either a virtuous or a not so virtuous circle. Like if I expect that you're super clever, a feedback loop, exactly. And then I expect you to know terms like feedback loop, and then you suddenly know them because there's something about that.
And now I feel clever.
Exactly. So and it's like so that's kind of what's going on there. And then obviously you just emphasize your correct guesses and move on quickly if you get it wrong. Yeah. That's pretty obvious. One of the things they do is they will restate things that the customer has already said. So if when they come in, they say that they're, oh, sorry, it's been a busy day. Halfway through the reading, you're like, I sense you've had a very busy day. They're like, whoa, because humans are rubbish at remembering those little details. Even if you do remember you said that, you'll be like, oh, she obviously wasn't listening, because otherwise, again, it's like, people are very ready to believe because they put their money down on the table. They're invested. They're literally invested. And, why not? It's more fun to go along with it. And that's always operating in the background. So I think as a psychic, if you're working with people who've paid to come and see you and get psychic readings of any sort, they're already on your side. They're very unlikely to say, oh, no, that's wrong. And then you basically operate on this amazing bias, I don't know what to call it, this tendency humans have, that we forget the things that we didn't like or that didn't work and remember all the things that we did. So I've spoken to friends who've had readings, really impressive readings. They say, oh, it's amazing, she knew this and that and whatever. I'm like, unless you have the tape of the reading, I just can't believe you. I can't believe what you're saying, because we know human memory is very, very fallible and biased. And you are going to remember the good parts of the reading and forget the bad ones. So the character that you're giving this reading is very positive, and I understand it was a positive experience for you. But unless we have the actual tape of the thing, you just don't know how many things she brushed over, or how many things where she gave a sort of vague statement about a relative and then you interpreted it to be a specific person. And then you remember, they're just the tricks of memory which incline you to reporting that you had a much better time than you maybe did. I mean, although that does raise a sort of philosophical question about, was it a good time if you remember it being a good time, but you weren't having fun at the time? But maybe put that aside for another day. So as I said, it's a mix. It's a mix of techniques which you can learn, and if you go online and search cold reading, you can learn how to do this stuff. But it's also just being nice and attentive and trying to please the other person. And if you are that sort of person and you keep getting hits and people are like, whoa, you're so insightful, and you're using some kind of tool, be it crystals or cards or whatever, people will start coming to believe that the wisdom is coming from somewhere other than themselves. I think maybe we've talked about this before, maybe in the medium episode, but I think this is particularly common in people with low self-esteem, because it's like, oh, how could I be so wise? These amazing insights, they couldn't possibly be my insights. They must come from some other realm. And then you just train yourself to rely on your confirmation bias or intuition, depending on which lens you're looking through, rather than rational analysis. There's this woman, amazing woman. She wrote an article for Skeptic magazine years and years ago called Karla McLaren. She was a kind of like psychic healer type person, and then she became a skeptic. And she talks about the different cultures. And this is something I find it harder and harder to talk about everything we talk about in the show, because now I kind of have a foot in each culture. So I'm like, oh, skeptics would say this, but of course someone else would say this. It's like, it's a bit confusing. And this is kind of the situation that this woman's in too. And she basically says that she picked up cold reading through cultural osmosis. Like, she saw other people doing it. She started using those same words. It started working. She didn't realize that's what she was doing, but it was what she was doing. And I mean, she just has some brilliant comments about how the culture of skepticism, and that's slightly like, I mean, I don't want to tar all skeptics with the same brush, but we can sometimes be a bit sneery, especially about stuff like tarot. And it makes it really hard for believers to talk to us. And if you want to access, say, like someone's like, oh, I really love tarot, and it's, you know, I think that actually maybe it is a bit spiritual and supernatural, but I'd like to see it from the other perspective. I'll go and look up some skeptical stuff about it. They just come up against this barrier of that sort of tone of dismissal and like calling people stupid and things like that, which is ridiculous, because these are all human ways of acting on human biases that we all have. It's not like skeptics don't have them. And
we're kind of doing them anyway. Like in
yes,
life, we're using
exactly.
these same skills to like communicate and build rapport with people and help people.
Yeah. So it's a very strange. I think the show that we recorded a year ago, I have to go back and re-listen if I can possibly listen to that terrible audio. I think maybe what I would have said then will be different to what I'm saying now, because, like, yeah, you're right. The things that I just described as cold reading are also the skills you use to make friends. So. But then again, I can't help but thinking, if you know you're cold reading, but you let people come in and see you, and they leave thinking you have access to supernatural powers, that doesn't seem cool.
That. I don't like that at all. Yeah.
And that's kind of where it gets me around to thinking about, like, you know, because you're kind of borrowing authority from this kind of supernatural framing of the whole thing. Yeah. And if your advice is bad, people will take it seriously because you're wearing the turban or whatever you're doing. I don't think they wear turbans anymore. But you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like hanging a doctor's certificate on your wall.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think even if you do believe that it's coming from a higher source, let's say, you can still offer bad advice.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of my personal, like, concerns around tarot. Just on offering advice, especially bad advice.
Yeah, because it's a very similar job to the job of a therapist, right?
Yes, completely.
And therapists have, I don't know, like 4 years training, and they get like they're members of a professional body, and people can register complaints about them. They have CRB checks, Criminal Records Bureau checks or whatever. Like, there's accountability in that system. And I don't think necessarily that tarot readers should have that. That'd be absurd. But is it cool to have people who are giving that sort of advice with literally no safety net? I don't know. Like,
I think that's a terrible idea. It's the same with astrology. It's like you want to make sure that, well, there are a couple of things. You want to make sure that their intentions are good, but then that they do have like a level of like people skills, because these things can be quite can go quite deep and maybe be quite damaging to a person.
Yeah, definitely, potentially. And people are very vulnerable when they come into therapy. And also, like, the whole thing of someone being a querent, you know, they have a question. These aren't just idle questions usually. They're like, you're going to see a tarot reader, you're paying money, you've figured out your question, it's a big question. And if you approach that person thinking they have all the answers and they give you the wrong answer, then you're really fucked.
Yeah.
Whereas if you approach it thinking, well, they might have some interesting insight, that's a slightly different relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
And luckily, I think generally from researching for this show, I get the impression that people are more in the second camp now. Although you can find plenty, and if you go to what'stheharm.net and tap on their psychics thing, you can find plenty of stories of people losing a lot of money and having their lives ruined by psychics giving them terrible advice. So it does still happen. But the kind of like us millennials aren't doing that so much, is the impression I get.
Yeah, I think the intention part is generally pretty solid, but I still do wonder about the just like the people skills, basic counselling skills stuff.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to be a really good tarot reader, go get like a counselling degree or something. Start there.
Or even just watch a Udemy course. You're fine. You're fine.
So what do you think? Are we going to advise our listeners to go away and give tarot a go?
Like, definitely, from me, definitely. I've definitely changed how I see tarot. Like, one of the lines that I've got from my notes from last time was, I'm not convinced on its use for fortune telling. I prefer to use it as a way to set intentions or to solve a problem. I am more open to the idea of, you know, these answers from the tarot coming from outside of me than I used to be.
Really?
So that definitely, yeah. And that,
what do you think's made that change?
I think getting more into astrology and seeing that operating as something that is running outside of me, because the planets are outside of me. So that, and just being open to it. So it's not to say like, all right, all of my money is on this, but it is just being a bit more open to it, maybe. And just over time, seeing the kind of personality that the tarot has. So if you're reading, and this is maybe an experiment for skeptical readers to try, which is like, maybe ask a similar question every day, something open-ended, so it's not a yes or no answer, but it's something like, you know, give me some advice for this day ahead or something like that. And yeah, that's hard because there are so many ways of interpreting that, but it is predictive in that way. It's basically giving you an overview or like a symbol to use on your day ahead, and you can reflect back on it at the end of the day. So if you were to do that, like for, you know, for a while, let's say 6 weeks, every day pick a card. I mean, it's funny the stuff that you see, and like, it's literally funny to me. Like for me, the tarot has a sense of humor in a way that astrology doesn't really as much.
Oh, that's weird.
But yeah, anyway, for me, this is like, this is fun. This is just part of my world right now. And in terms of like how I recommend other people to see it, I just think be open to it coming from inside or outside. And if the outside thing like really turns you off, then don't. Just use it as a way to speak to your better, higher self.
Yeah, I actually think that experiment is a really good idea. I might do that. I'm a skeptical reader. I'm kind of I'm kind of thinking. Yeah, I am thinking about getting more into it. I have this barrier. I love the aesthetic. I can like rationalize that it's fine because taking a moment to think, to be given a prompt by the cards to think about something that might be relevant to my life. It actually kind of reminds me a bit of some like a realization I had at some stage when I was studying English literature, which is, I mean, a lot of people kind of see studying literature as looking for hidden messages in the text. And I don't know who it was some lecturer or something that sort of reoriented me and made me realize it's not about looking for hidden meaning in the text. It's about paying attention in a different way to the text. And I think if instead of thinking that there's something speaking to me from beyond, which I think is implausible for many reasons previously discussed, if I think of it as a chance to pay attention to a subject and to an idea, and a different kind of attention than I normally do, and a moment to just have that moment in my day, I think that is a really useful thing. I mean, with all this reservations that I've already said, and I do worry about people being taken advantage of, and I think there's not much you can do about that except say be careful to people and don't take anyone's advice, even if they are wearing a turban. I'd encourage our listeners to give it a go. Like, why not?
And especially what I like about tarot is that you can do it yourself.
Yes.
Or more so, you know, I really don't think, I think it's nice to get another person's POV from it, but like, not like astrology where it's actually quite hard to do it yourself, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I quite like the idea, maybe I'll propose this to you, of having regular little friend dates to get together with your mate and a glass of wine or a bottle and maybe some weed and some cards and lay them out on the table and have a chat about your lives in like a intense way, because I think, I mean, often, actually, you and we often will talk about subjects, but we don't talk about our own lives that much because we're kind of,
And for us especially, because we're both like a bit on the spectrum, and not to offend anyone, I hope that didn't. It's great to be on the spectrum, in my opinion.
We love it here.
But basically, I think sometimes I need a medium for us to discuss things, and I think tarot would be perfect. Judging on our readings today, I thought that was I felt very connected.
Aww.
I felt very seen.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. Let's make our next date as soon as we can leave our houses again. We'll make a date to do that.
Could even do it over Zoom. I mean, that's how
true.
flexible tarot is. Yeah.
Great. So everyone, go purchase your deck of cards, and enjoy yourselves, and let us know what you think.
Happy taroting. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd really love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @seekerskeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And if you're interested, you can find my skeptically themed comics at rebeccaonpaper.com or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at yoga_astrology on Twitter. And you can find me exploring the intersection of yoga and astrology at yogaandastrology.com.
If you liked what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store or wherever you're listening.
Or just tell somebody you know about the show. Thanks for listening.
We're still at a loss to explain the peculiar magic of the tarot. It remains a mysterious tool which somehow unlocks thoughts and emotions and foreshadows the future. But for those who use the tarot and live with it, there's no denying it. It's all in the cards.